Okay, show and tell time again. And my cut is actually healing up pretty good. For those of you who are a little squeamish and might not want to see it, but it cut pretty deep into the skin, but it didn't go any further than the skin. And just keeping antibiotic ointment on it and wrapped and without using it has helped it heal really fast. Okay, so I tried knapping some blades yesterday and today. So I did get some knapping in. This one was difficult material. I did it this morning and I stopped because it was, I think I cracked it right there. Anyway, I'm keeping this one. Turned out okay. Both heat treated rocks of very low quality to start with, and with a little bit of heat, 350 degrees, for a few hours, made them very knappable. And I did cut this down. I cut the handle down, so now I like it much better. So I'll be producing more of these for sure, hopefully for a long time to come. So I like this style of knife with the wooden handle to imitate the look of the Danish daggers. Okay. Now on to the subject of the video. This is my personal collection. These artifacts were given to me by a very generous friend of mine, and they're all archaic, right? And I don't know the name of the site, and if there is a name for this site, Dusty, you can let me know. I forgot already. Anyway, if I don't find out, or if I can't remember, I'll just call this site CTX for Central Texas 01, just so I can refer back to it when I make more videos on these artifacts, because there's going to be several videos on the artifacts. This case is just a small sample. I got 3 more boxes, plus I got a bunch of it stashed in my yard, which includes a mono, a bunch of nutting stones, and all kinds of other bifaces and cores and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so okay, I was wondering where these went. Cool. I thought I had lost these little miniatures. I don't know if you remember these. I had these in a different video. Cool. I was wondering where they went. Okay. All right, so let's start here. I don't know what this is, right? But it's obviously modified by somebody. It looks like it was going to be a pipe, or this is just a facsimile of a pipe with a natural. This is a natural hole in the limestone, right? And they just embellished it by scratching in some designs and scratching in these radial lines, I guess to make it look like a sun, right? And they started to drill a little hole in the bottom, maybe to turn it into a pipe, but didn't mean to go very far, or said to themselves, nah, it's probably not worth it. Okay, so these are not all going to be projectile points or that sort of thing. This is just a little personal item that someone made for themselves. It could also be a baby carrier, right? I don't know. To look like a little carrier for a baby or whatever. Anyway, I thought that was very, very cool. That's my favorite one in here. This is probably a stone used for the bow drill. That's what I imagine that would be used for. Hold it in your hand. It fits perfectly, and you know how you use a bow drill, and you have something to place the upper end of the drill in there, and then you either drill holes in stone for jewelry or bone or whatever, or you start fires with it, or maybe all those things. But that was very cool too. Okay, so some of these I've tried to identify, and some of them I haven't. So let's just go through and look at them all. They're all going to be different types and styles. That's a Fairland. Looks like impact damage Nice translucency on this one. There's impact damage or some sort of damage to the base, to the ear. It was probably just as long as this one. Oh, I'll do reproductions of these one day. This is a Frio, the bottom of a Frio Point, which also looks like it's snapped off in the haft. And there may be some impact damage there. It probably is impact damage. Okay. Blade probably broken in construction. Probably here first, and then maybe the one that was discarded, it broke the tip off. Because that looks like an impact right here. So that's more of a drop impact, not a flint knapping impact. But this one is a classic flint knapping error. And why didn't they continue to use it as a point anyway? I don't know. But these edges are not developed to a fine extent, so that tells me it's not finished. You know, they're not developed like this, right? Or this. This is a developed edge, or what I call a developed edge. This is not developed or refined or finished or whatever you want to call it. There's no final retouch, but we can get to see how this was developed as far as the flaking on the blade before it is finished. And there's bold flaking, most likely indirect percussion. These may have been punched in or pressured in. This is a flake from the skin of the nodule because there's still cortex within this piece. So this only happens near the surface. So it's probably raw skin from the exterior of the nodule. So which is the highest quality of the chert. The chert just under the skin or just under the cortex. And when you remove those, you know, it's common parlance to call it skinning flakes off the nodule to obtain the best chert. Okay, this is a Pedernales style point. It has a very slight twist to it. Or this, if you look at it, this edge is downward. This edge goes a little bit upward. It probably continues all the way up, or it did before it snapped. This looks like a clean snap, just and a little bit of damage to the barb. And the clean snap can happen in any number of ways, especially by accident, by dropping it or something. Okay, another Pedernales style point. This one does look like it has some impact damage to it, and it's quite thin. Some of these Pedernales points, or maybe it's even the Baker point, I don't know, the stem is rather short, right, in comparison to the other one. So this may not be a Pedernales, but I labeled it that way anyway. The width of the stem, these are very similar, right, and they're both very thin. Now these are all from the same site. Okay, so keep that in mind. Everything I'm showing you is from the same site, and I'm calling it CTX01. Okay. This one's definitely a Marshall type point. Clean snap. Doesn't seem like any defects in the stone itself. Right, so it's just a use snap or someone stepped on it, whatever. And you can see that the edges are fully refined or developed, so that we know that it was finished. But you can still see quite a bit of the bold flaking used to thin the piece in the beginning. And we can also see that there's a little bit of step fracturing going on at the bottom of the notches. Okay, now with punch work, ask yourself, does that occur with punch work more often than it does with pressure? Or just the opposite? Does that happen with pressure more than with punch work? I think it happens more with pressure, right? So they could have just developed the final stages of these notches with pressure. It could have been punched in early, during the early stages, but it looks to me like they finished them out at least the finishing with pressure. Okay. This is looks like a Pedernales, although again the stem is rather short, so it may not be a Pedernales. It could be one of these, which is probably, not probably, it could be a variation of a Pedernales, or a related type. Okay. And these are all very thin. So from this site, it looks like they were making very thin versions of the Pedernales points. And this edge is still pretty sharp. This one is not as sharp. And it's, I can't tell what kind of a break that is, accidental or impact. There's a ding here. One of the ears is broken off. And of course the tip missing. This one is probably another Pedernales type. Let's see. I made one the other day. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah. I made a Pedernales the other day. I don't think I got it right, but I was trying to imitate something like this. But I think I made the neck too narrow just by looking at this one here. But there may be another one in here in this collection that looks like this. But anyway, I had snapped this. This is a snap, right? So I just refurbished the snapped off tip. And I put in these notches in the stem. Now, if you look at the way I developed the blades and the way they did, it's slightly different. Right? This one looks like it's complete. And there may have been some pressure retouch, intrusive pressure into the original flake scars. Okay, so I'm just going to keep this off to the side. If I can find something that resembles this, I'll bring it out. This is kind of, sort of. Anyway. But, I do these and they're not exactly correct, but I keep them anyway. And when we find stuff that is kind of off, like in the real artifacts, it may be because they're just practice points, like I just did. I did that for practice to get kind of the feel for it. Still works, right? But it's not completely matching the what you call it, the standard design. Okay. Now this one, you can see how they developed the edges with fine retouch. I think the flake scars are showing up okay in this light. And it's a finished point. It probably resharpened at least once, and it has some impact, what looks like severe impact damage to the tip. Probably impact damage to this area as well. Maybe on the way out. Hard to say. It looked like there might have been a defect in the stone itself, causing that strange crack pattern. You know what I mean? That there may be a defect in the stone causing that. This particular piece feels heat treated to me. A lot of these others, I have heat treated material like this, but they may or may not be heat treated or only partially heat treated. But a lot of times, heat treat is the only way to get these things thinned down. And I won't harp on that too much. But let me just show you an example of some stone. Let's see. Okay. Show an example of some stone that benefits a lot from heat treating. It can be worked raw, but it's just terrible in the raw state, right? It's very grainy, very rough and dull and dry. in the raw state. And trying to thin it down in the raw state is almost impossible with soft tools. You can do it with steel and copper, right? But to do it with antler and aluminum takes some heat treatment to get it to work, right? So I heat treated these. This is all heat treated. It doesn't change the color or anything. It doesn't even change the way it feels. The sharpness. This does feel grippy and spiky, but so do these edges. They still feel grippy and spiky. But much easier to thin. I mean, there's no way I can get this thin with a piece like this if it's not heat treated, because it just requires way too much power. First of all, to remove the flakes that are this broad and across center, right, for one thing. And second, to do it with a soft tool is extremely difficult. You have to thin it from the very beginning and basically just nap around the edges if it's raw. Okay. All right. So that's all on that one. And see, we can find here in my area, well, not my area, but in central Texas, we can find a lot of this low quality chert. I mean, there's literally hundreds of tons of it in rivers and streams and, fields and hilltops and all that kind of stuff. It has this low quality chert. We can make what I think is awesome looking points from it if we apply a little bit of heat. Okay. So, same kind of deal with this stone, even though this is a higher quality chert. It's very dense and very waxy feeling. I think this is a heat treated piece. Okay, let's move on here. Go on to the second row. I don't want to take these out too fast. Okay. It looks like a Gower type point. Heavily used first of all, and then impact damage. So probably resharpened, well, not probably, definitely resharpened before impact. The final impact damage ruined everything. This is very thick, so it barely fits into the foreshaft of this size. So there was either pretty hefty foreshaft or very wide notches, or it's a spear point, with a thick shaft. But I can't imagine using that on a spear. But it's not impossible. Okay. This one is a Merrell Point. Okay, yeah. So Merrell and Gower are similar. So maybe these are all Merrell points. And the edges are finished. Still slightly sharp. Looks like there's pressure retouch to finish it out. But you can see there's some original broad, bold flake scars. It'd be nice to see a full complete version of this type Merrell, right? Let's see. I like these because they're asymmetrical, right? It's no big deal if there's step fractures and imperfections. The quality of the material is not that great. These are fun to make because they're not all fancy like this. This requires a lot of technical expertise, a lot of time, a lot of planning, a lot of being very picky on the material you're gathering, and to meet certain requirements. Thick here at the junction of the blade and the stem, symmetrical, all that stuff. These are a pain to make, in other words, right? Not fun. They're beautiful when they're finished, right? But they're kind of a pain. This is fun from start to finish. You just grab something that looks like it might be nappable. It is nice and translucent, right? We don't know if these are heat treated or not, so it doesn't really matter. This piece probably is, just because it's so much easier to work with pressure flaker if it is heat treated, and this looks like a lot of pressure toward the end. Just a guess, of course. I don't know. I don't have the machinery to test out whether or not it's heat treated or not. Anyway, let's look up Merrell and see if we can find a completed one. I don't think they're very long. All right, let's see. Merrell, yeah. These are actually quite short. This might be not a Merrell. If these are typical and they're very thick and very large and wide, this may be something else. Let's see. Let's look up Gower. GH. So these are smaller, right? But they don't have those really weird feet on them. These feet are mainly down projecting instead of outward. So I guess that's why I call that one a Merrell. But the blade is different from these other ones. Right? These are sharply pointed instead of parallel sided like this one. So I'd like to find one like this that has parallel sides in a complete state. Okay. Of course, the various sites have different variations, right? It could be just this site that had that type. All right, this blade, it does have a pronounced twist to it. Very thin, translucent material. And they didn't care about step fractures. They didn't care about being perfect or symmetrical. The notches are not even close to being symmetrical. The barbs are not either. I think the only word about was the width of the neck. These all seem to be very consistent across the neck. And as my friend Dusty pointed out, I should be doing a lot of numbers on these, which requires measurements and weights and all that. I just haven't gotten to do that part. I haven't written down all the measurements or taking snapshots of these things either. I want to take pictures of each and every one and do all the measurements and the weights and stuff. And then we can get averages and display all the data on charts and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, let's start going through these quicker. Again, these are all from the same site. Okay. Different materials. So far we've seen quite a few different materials, right? Just in this little stack. These are all different materials. You don't, many times you don't find these side by side. You know, some of this looks like it's fossiliferous or contains fossils. Some of it doesn't. Some of it is more dense, like this one here. This type here is more like this type. Right? This is like this type of rock, which is different from this type, which is different from this type. Okay? Now, see, they're getting theirs extremely thin. The only way I could do that is with heat treating the material. Not saying that they did it that way, but I mean, you can't argue with the similarity in the flaking. Right? In the way that it steps. See that step here and that step here? It's the same depth or the same height of these stepped areas. See how that works? That kind of gives you an indication of the strength of the flakes. And I'm getting the same kind of these hairline little step fractures. You know, see that one and that one? Same type of stuff. And I can tell just by looking at it, it's very similar material. It's got those rough areas intermittently dispersed within the piece. Where's the other one I had? Like, see that this, yeah, the inclusions like that. There's some inclusions in here that are similar. So there's that. Okay. Okay, so these are just broken tips. This one is heat damaged after the fact, but look at that little needle tip. And it looks like the sides came in very abruptly. So whatever this was, whatever it was kind of wide before it snapped off, and then the tip ended up getting baked in a fire or something. Another interesting tip development on this one. It looks like a clean snap from a projectile point or a knife. All right, and we got these. This one is a Martindale. Yes, Martindale. Impact fracture, very severe. This one is probably a Merrell, right? One of those fun ones you can make that you don't have to pay too much attention to how it looks in the symmetry or much else. Made from lower quality chert. Even though it's pretty to look at, this particular chert has fossils or some kind of inclusions in it, probably very unpredictable. There's an undetached flake here. This happens with pressure or percussion, so it's hard to tell what those notches were, how they were developed, either with pressure or percussion. I would say pressure. And this edge is very sharp. This edge, yeah, also very, oops. This edge also very sharp. But this one is very thin. There's no symmetry to these things. See how thick this edge is compared to that one? Whereas these highly refined types, same edge on each side, basically identical in cross section. But this one, you know, one side is fairly thick, one side very thin. All right, so these are more fun to make, okay, I think. And you can make a lot of them fast, I would imagine, if you don't have to pay too much attention to the standard design. Okay. I won't use the word mental template. Okay, just so I don't trigger anybody. All right, so here's one that's been resharpened. Nice and sharp on both sides. Very nice material. As far as a feel, it's waxy, could be raw or heated. I've seen material like this in the raw state that's easy to nap. Again, if you skin the nodule and get the chert from just under the cortex, a lot of times it's very easy to nap. Okay. Here's another interesting one. I'm calling this a Jetta. Looks like it's been resharpened. Because I don't know if these barbs are developed that thin to begin with. I think the first stage is a little bit thicker or wider than this. And they start getting very pointy and narrow when they get resharpened. That's what I'm thinking anyway. But who knows? Nice. I got some of this type of material. Impact damage. Let's see, get the focus correct here. Lots of impact damage. Thin. Nice material. This could all be high quality raw material. It's hard to tell. The edges are pretty worn. They feel, let's see, some of them feel really sharp and some of them I can't tell if it's been reworked or not. Resharpened, or if it's original, or if it's been maybe not reworked but worn down through usage and not just resharpened. See, I think this has been resharpened. Or which one was it? Yeah, no, this one here. Used and then resharpened, I think. Anyway, our friend over here is trying to peek. Kevin, hello. Yeah, I'm taking up his space with the table. All right, so this one's got some impact damage for sure. Now I can study these forever because they're mine, right? I can look at the thinness, I can look at everything. I can bring these out when I want to try to imitate them. These are cool to make because, again, they don't care about the flake patterning. Or the symmetry. Here you can almost see the shape of the tool used for the notch. See how nicely popped out that is? And there's a little pressure step on the other side. All right, I'll continue on the next segment. Okay. Again, it's hard for me to tell if these are made this way or resharpened this way. See, there's a large flake here. It's relatively large compared to other retouch flakes. So, I mean, that could be like an indirect percussion flake. It could be a pressure flake as well. But there's one here too, coming off of this. These could all be pressure flakes, but they could be like light percussion, which tells me if that's a light percussion flake, they're usually done while the point is in the first stage. Like originally it was made that way with the punches and all that, with the indirect percussion or whatever. And then retouched for the final sharpening. If that's the case, then the final sharpening produces that shape, and it's not reused, or it was not worn down from use. It's hard to tell. I can't tell. That I cannot tell. We just have to find stuff that's been broken in manufacture of that style to see what the original piece looks like in the first stages. Okay. What's interesting to me also is the fact that there's what appears to be very miniature type of these little dart points. See, that's way too small to fit in that. And it's a little bit too thick for this. Let's see. But it fits well into this one. Although you need some wiggle room to get this to line up, because the blade is canted to one side. If we could see the rest of that blade, it would be out to here. So you would need a flat bottom notch so you could have some room to play with. Or the notch has to be, you know, straight on one side and then totally angled on the other side. Drastically angled. But the width on this one works. The width on this one works too, but not the width this way works, but not the width this way inside the notch. And this one does have wiggle room, so if it was a wider notch, I could wiggle that in there to get the blade straight. Okay. But it's interesting, these little teeny, these small based or small stemmed projectile points, when you find them in the same site as these other ones with large or wide stems. Nice translucency. Impact damage. None of these are ground on the sides of the stem, as far as I can tell. Yeah, they're all sharp. And this is actually sharper than this up here. The sides of the stem are sharper than this, which tells me there's use wear, you know. Because if they can get it sharp here, they can certainly get it sharp up here. So it tells me that there's some use wear. Yeah. Okay. Answer Fairland. Yeah, just by looking at that one notch on that side, it's an answer. And Fairland, it looks like, because it probably has a long ear. But, you know, I'm kind of guessing on all these. I'm not an expert on identifying these. All right, so I'll have to go through the rest of these more quickly. This one looks like a Nolan. The stem is beveled on the opposite sides. Pretty straightforward. Bold, thinning flakes. Percussion looks like. A blade that was either being developed as a drill or just a worn out knife that eventually looks like a drill after many, many resharpenings. This looks like it's not a resharpening attempt, but an actual attempt to create a drill because of these huge flakes. Now, that could be an original flake from way back when they first developed this nodule into a biface. But I would tend to think that this little step was created toward the end of making this. So I can kind of see where the edges of the flake are. If I trace it back, it's not much further back. You know, the impact would be a little bit further back and it would create that step. So it would seem to me to be pretty narrow when they created that step. So it looks like they were trying to develop a drill. And that's what I do when I try to develop a drill for foreshafts. You just go straight for developing a drill. You don't take something that's worn out. Like, man, this is getting kind of worn out, so let's just make it into a drill. No, you start it as a drill from start to finish. Okay. This one here, I'm guessing it is a Laguna, but it might not be. But I just did that because of the base. I have some of this material. This is the Owl Creek Black. In this case, it's the gray variety that I've shown in another video, right? Yeah, I tried to make not a Marshall, but no, I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, this one looks like it has some heat damage on it. This works perfect in a raw state, so it doesn't need to be heat treated. I can't tell if that's done before or after the fact. It does not need to be heat treated, so I would assume that's after the fact. And this whole thing might be broken simply by heat and not by impact. You know what I mean? So all this breakage could be the result of heat. And it looks like it probably is. It was probably a perfect point, and then either there's a cremation burial or it got caught in a forest fire or whatever and broke up when heat was applied to it. That would be my guess. Because this stuff works beautifully in a raw state. Okay. I've got a bunch of bifaces. And partial points. Okay, I think we'll start with this. I have several that are broken in this way, right? I could probably gather a bunch of these together. I think I have 4 or 5 that are broken in this particular way. The stem is done first, the notches are done, and then the blade is thinned. This is a very powerful strike. I don't know where it, I mean, it's probably coming from this direction here. But you see how it's broken, and it's very thick in the part. Originally, if we're symmetrical, this thing is extremely thick. See how that works? If I take the stem and I insert this, because you know they try it in a foreshaft, probably, and they go, okay, the stem is thin enough now. Let's thin out the blade. If we are assuming symmetry, like in regular biface, at least there's some symmetry, right? Even though some of these are not symmetrical. If we assume some symmetry, that's pretty thick. So they're trying to thin very thick blades, or very thick portions of the biface into a blade, which is interesting to me. And like I said, I have several of these. And this looks like material just under the skin of the nodule. Or it's heavy patina, but I don't think that's patina. Again, we have translucency. Now, yeah, bold flaking for sure. It looks like pressure was used to make these notches, although there is a big percussion flake here. But to finish out the notch, it looks like some pressure was used. But definitely some bold initial percussion flakes. Okay. All right, so let's see. I'll be bouncing around here. Let's do the actual pieces that look like they're broken in manufacture. This kind of material is rare. It's kind of a greenish color, sort of. Nice though, right? Large flakes, bold flakes. Starting to see a pattern here where there's a lot of bold percussion flakes. And it looks like there's no pressure retouch. I can do this all with indirect percussion to this stage. It looks like there's no pressure retouch at all. So this is either done with direct percussion or indirect percussion to this stage. Even the notch development. To me, it doesn't look like any pressure was used. To me, anyway. And there's obvious impact from a percussor here. Pressure doesn't do that. Pressure usually will remove something or nothing at all. It doesn't leave a smash with a bunch of fractures in it like that. But percussion does do this type of fracture. So yeah, they developed this particular piece with percussion to this stage, and then I guess it broke in manufacture. That's the only reason why I would discard this anyway. Okay. Oh yeah, I got a couple of thin Montels. I think I've shown these already. This is similar to Georgetown. And I don't know what you would call this chert, but yeah, they don't come from the same area, but they end up in the same site and used for the same type of point. Asymmetrical, right? So it looks like they did not finish this one yet. This side looks more fully refined than this side. And it makes sense since this is still wide compared to that one. All right, at least I think it makes sense. And another thin Montel. Bold thinning flakes toward the very end stages. I can't tell if this is broken in manufacture or what, but I think it was a finished point just by looking at the edges, and it was broken by accident somehow. And I say probably stepped on. I say that a lot, right? But that's because I make that mistake. I've stepped on them before by accident. Several times before I got wise and got used to handling them so I wouldn't be setting them down on the ground when I'm doing something else. Okay. So it's just a biface being developed. Thinning flakes from both ends on this one. Nice translucency. I've got several points made of this type of material. Little speckles in it. Some of the cortex still there. Let's see. Okay, so I'll just run through these more quickly. This material is nice. Now, could some of these be other tools like adzes and that kind of thing? On this, I don't think so. This looks like a classic biface development toward a projectile point objective, right? And not an adze. I could be wrong. That could be use damage, right? It could be use damage, and that large flake removed on purpose there so it would present a very narrow, very thin edge. So this could be an adze. If I were using it as an adze, I would probably take one more flake here so I could flatten this. Otherwise, there's got to be a lot of glue or something in there to hold it, to keep it from rocking around. Because when you're hitting, and you've got this bump here, that's going to be rocking in the haft. Like it's going to be hafted. Like let's say my hand is a piece of wood. It's going to be hafted to the top like this, or to the bottom or whatever. Either way, you've got lumps, and this thing is going to be rocking around, rocking like a seesaw when you're trying to chop something. Well, yeah, you could carve the wood to match that. Yeah, but it'd be a lot easier if you just flatten one side. Now, could it be used just like this in the hand? Yeah, it could be used like that too. But this sharp area back here tells me that it could cut you. There's a possibility that if you're using it like that, this is going to cut you. So I wouldn't use it that way. But it's interesting to speculate. Yeah. Maybe only this part was hafted, just down here, into something, and it was used like a little axe. I don't know. It does have the overall shape of an adze. It does have some intentional shaping, because you could easily eliminate a percussion flake. If you develop a good platform there, you can easily develop a pretty good flake if that's what you wanted to do. But if you didn't want to do that and you're just shaping it to get it to this shape, that's probably what it would look like. So initially I said that this is a bifacial development with the projectile point in mind. But, after looking at it and thinking about it, it could also be an adze. Just one that was more crude than I would use, but it's not impossible to use it, I suppose. Even with that, what I consider an obvious defect on one side, it could still be used. Anyway. Alright, this is a skinning flake. It's got a lot of original cortex, and they just took it off, and they were developing this for something. This is what I would call a quarry blank or a trade blank. As you can take it home in this state. You can go to the quarry, knock off a bunch of these from various stones, and then bring them back in this state and finish them off later. It's obviously percussed around the outside just to get it into the general shape. Same with this one. Looks like a quarry blank. Still some cortex here near the tip. Or a trade blank. You can trade these for distances. It's a high quality material in both the raw or the heated state. There does appear to be some damage. See that? Now you can get this damage through heating, but I've also seen rocks that I've not heated, that I've broken in a raw state, and they have that crazing on the inside, and I just discard it when I see that because it may be throughout the whole stone. So maybe that's what they did with this one. They were developing the biface. They cracked it a little bit here. Although we don't see that type of break in knapping very often. This is a Buren type thing. And if they saw this in a raw state, you want to use it. But it could have been heat treated and broken that way, and the crazing resulting from heat. Or it could have been just sitting too close to a heat source without the intention of heating it. And that part of it broke off and oops, it's probably ruined, so they discarded it. I would still use this to make a projectile point if I was, hurting for material. I would definitely still try to use it. Because you can get a blade of that size, of this other size, pretty easily. This could be either a blade that was used or it's just a biface developed for final thinning. It would be a nice knife, hafted, or it would be a nice biface to look at just before, to look at just before you thin it. Is you develop the edges, make them refined, and then look to see where you can strike to do the thinning flakes. That's why I say it's nice to look at, because in this stage it's nice because you can see where the problem areas are after you regularize the edge. So there's various possibilities. This one looks like a graver to me. This tip looks utilized. There's a definite polish here on this side. Now it could be just because of the nature of this flake. The termination is rounded here like a hinge, but it feels very polished, more so than the regular surface of the original flake. It feels more polished here, so it may have been used for burnishing. Right? This could be used for graving. You smooth out the surface and then you can make engravings into the surface. It feels like it's very, well, in this direction, you can hold it very well. And there's also some micro flaking or use on this edge here for something, it still feels kind of sharp. So multi-surface type tool. And you can burnish this way, like this. You don't have to be up on the edge. And that would, if you burnish that way, you don't have to rock it very much to get the polish on this side also. And that could be used for cutting or scraping. This is very sharp on the inside there. So, interesting little tool. Biface, curved biface, quarry blank, I would say. I don't know what to tell you on these curved ones. I can't get a long point out of this. I couldn't, right? I'd have to lose quite a bit of the point or the base. But who knows? May have been used for something, or destined for use as something. This one is looks like a quarry blank to me, although it has a heat pop also. And that could be incidental after the fact. This was caught in a forest fire or whatnot. Or it could be one of those pieces that you heat treat, like the other ones that you try to heat treat, and that's just a consequence of heating it up. Either way, I can't tell you which one it was. This material, I would guess, works good raw or heated. Either way. And it looks like percussion developed this, There's no pressure marks, no abrading really. Just a bunch of percussion. Still very sharp, very jaggedy. Just like they just percussed it very quickly. With no real plan on shape or anything. This one looks like they had some stem development going on this one. Yeah, I would say it's a quarry blank. Although there's some defects in the stone, it may have been discarded because it just doesn't look like a whole lot of fun to finish. That turtleback's pretty bad. If I wanted to remove that turtleback, I would have to probably come in from the tip, right? So I would lose a lot of the tip, and it may not conform to the length of their mental template, right? Might not be long enough, so discarded. Or just put aside and never used, never fully developed. Again, just percussion all the way. Everything looks like percussion flaking. Okay. Some undeveloped blades, broken in manufacture, extremely thin, very pointy. The stack is mean. Yeah. That's probably percussion, right? Indirect percussion. You wouldn't pressure flake into that stack, right? I mean, am I wrong? Some of you guys, would you pressure flake into a stack like that? Or would you try to remove it with indirect percussion? It looks like percussion to me. And with indirect, that's what I would guess, because the edge is so thin. If you use direct percussion on the edge that thin, you risk taking a big bite. Of course, you risk taking a big bite anyway, but with direct percussion, it's not as accurate, and you could be way up too high on the surface and take a big bite out of it. But you can also get very, very good with percussion and hit these small platforms So it could be either way. But I would put my money on this whole thing being developed with percussion, but not successfully, and then finally broken in manufacture. Probably with a strike that was extremely hard to try to get rid of the stack. That would be my guess. Although I could put a flaker on that stack and at least take off a little bit of the top of it. If not, I could grind it down on a rock. Just keep grinding and grinding it on a rock. But with raw stone, grinding it on a rock takes forever. So you don't see much of that anyway. If any, you don't see any of these. I haven't seen one artifact that has a ground down stack. So looks like it looks like, I don't know. To me it looks finished, right, with an impact fracture. But the sides are all jaggedy. So I couldn't tell you, but it does look like an impact burin there and an impact fracture here. So it could be just very crude edged point, just simple triangular point. And they threw it at something. Okay, yeah, here we go. Tortugas. Maybe that's a Tortugas as well. That last one. I'm guessing this is a Tortugas. And there looks like there's some pressure retouch on the sides. And that's definite impact fracture as far as I'm concerned. The base too. Impact either from knapping or usage on the base, but the tip, obvious impact. So it could have impacted in the haft to create that. Yeah. To create that flake, right? Or create that fracture. At the same time the impact was created. Or they just left it. They didn't care while they were knapping. They left it like that. And it fits within this haft. Although you have to work with it. You have to have some wiggle room to straighten that blade out. Oh, it'll work that way. One side of that notch is angled more. One side of that notch, yeah. And it wouldn't be hafted this deep. I would haft it about that deep. With lots of glue. Okay. I labeled this a Kinney. Yeah. Translucent material. And I would say impact damage. Okay. Next segment. Okay. Let's see. Mojita. Yeah, this is a pretty obvious point type with the rounded ears and, shallow side notches. Yeah. Definite impact fracture here. Or what I consider a definite impact fracture. Finished point. The edges are fairly well retouched. Calcium deposit from age. Not on the original point. Nolan. There's a definite weird fracture here. Right? Probably impact. As it snaps, it can generate a flake like that. Or trying to reuse it somehow, and they struck off a flake from the flat end. But I would say it's probably an impact related fracture. Base is beveled, rather thick. Yeah, but it fits in there. So yeah, you could throw that stuff. It doesn't have to be a knife. You can definitely throw the Nolans Okay. All right, last little section in the tackle box. Okay, so oh yeah, another thin Montel. I need to put this with the other Montels. I don't know, heavily damaged, heavily damaged. No. Some people say you have to have raw stone to thin it down this far because you need the strength of the stone so it can hold together. But like I was explaining with this one, I need it to be heated in order to get it that thin because it's hard to remove flakes. But on a material like this, if it's high quality, you can work it raw and get it this thin. I'm not going to argue with that. Combination of pressure and percussion, but pretty obvious large percussion flakes in the final thinning, especially when you have this kind of things where you try to meet in the middle. If the flakes don't carry all the way, you try to get these flakes to meet up somehow. Strike from both sides. It thins down the middle. Sometimes you get the furrow effect where they both dive in, so it's not flat, but it's actually looks like a V indentation in the middle, or what I call a furrow, like when you plow a furrow into dirt, that kind of thing. I have one or two that way. If they come out, I don't know if I have it in this particular collection, but if I do have them, I'll definitely show you. Looks like impact damage to me. Sides here, I'm always perplexed by that, right? Most of the sides on points that are well, I can't say that. This one does flare out slightly, but on most of them they're contracting. You can tell where the point's going to be. You can see that it contracts from the barbs. Even though it might be convex, it narrows. But on some of these, like these two, see how the edge flares out. This edge is also flaring out. It's hard for me to decide what's going on with these, because I would say that this is just, this one here was broken by accident and it was the first stage. But this one doesn't look like it's broken by accident. It looks like they actually threw it at something. Right? But if I look at it, it looks like the edge is flaring out like this one. So it could have been thrown at something at the first stage and then broken. And that's it. Game over. Okay, so pretty typical impact damage. Stem, everything. Heat pops after the fact, right? Yeah. There's incomplete pop there. So yeah. Cremation, burial, forest fire, brush fire, or whatever. Oh yeah, this is what I consider a very obvious haft snap from impact. Little impact fracture there, it looks like. The haft snap is when it's in the haft and it snaps. And you have the arrangement, typical arrangement, looks like this, or like that, right? But you get these semicircular snaps. I've gotten those myself personally from a stem like this, where it makes contact with the wood, it snaps off and you get semicircles here and here, where it makes contact with the wood. So that's what you have here. In my view, that's what happens. These snaps occurred because of contact with the bottom of the haft. Same with this one, I would imagine. That's an impact fracture. To me, it looks like an impact fracture. Nice translucency. And you can see there's some snapping pressure causing it to do that. This one, I can't tell. There's weird impact on the edge here. Little ding on the barb. Snap across the whole blade. Can't tell if that's impact or just accidental. This one looks like a heat damage, but that one does look like a impact or very powerful snap. Heat damage after the fact. Where is this? Yeah, I can't tell where the notches are or if it's some kind of eccentric. It looks like this is one of the ears like that, right? But there's a big old mistake in the side, or they were just practicing some notching. All right, well, that's the end, and I do have to go. Gotta run an errand. Okay, I'll upload this. I'll string them all together and I'll upload this. Okay.